Okay, then welcome everyone. Welcome back to the first session of this year's seminar. It's a particular pleasure to have today Franco Mariuzzo as a speaker, and he was so kind actually to jump in very quickly. I'm always very late in organizing the seminar, but as we all know, Italians are very flexible, and I think so he was so kind to be as flexible and jump in as the first speaker. I think this year, as usual, we have a very fine lineup of speakers, and I think also the first speaker is a very renowned speaker in the field, and it's a great pleasure to have him here. And please be aware of the fact that we will have seminars partly online and partly at the university. So today, as you have realized, it's online. Next week, it will be again back at the university, and then it will be online, but you will see it actually at our newsletter, whether it's online or in presence at the university. So Franco is an associate professor in econometrics in the School of Economics and a member of the Center of Competition Policy at the University of East Anglia. He obtained his bachelor degree in economics and commerce from the University of Venice and a master's degree in economics and finance from the University or from Venice International University. He also completed his doctorate in quantitative economics in 2004 at the University of Venice. And before he joined the University of East Anglia, he also covered the position of a contract lecturer at Trinity College from 2004 to 7. He was also a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Groningen. And he was before that also an associate at the University College in Dublin, again from 2008 to 2011. He has published many articles among empirical industrial economics in many prestigious journals. And today he will talk about platform competition in the tablet PC market, the effect of application quality. And we are very much looking forward to your talk. And it's a great pleasure to have you, Franco, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, Lars, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to I cannot say the great pleasure to be there, let's say in person, but at least to be there online, and then trying to, let's say, give you an idea what this article is about. So this is an article which is joined with a former PhD student of mine, Tan Doan, who now is working for Ofcom, and it's called, and then Fabio Maria Manenti, who is a good friend and co-author from University of Padua. So you see, I studied in the University of Venice, so for many years, and now I'm in another part of the world with worse weather, believe me. So apart from that, I'll say everything here is good. I like the University of East Anglia. Before I talk about this, it's a nice place, and we have the Center for Competition Policy, where I'm a member of. And then since I moved here, part of my research has shifted a little bit towards competition economics as well. This is part of what I call work on platforms, and then and as I say, we came out with this idea. I started with Fabio and I having a chat, and then we got this data set, and then we thought, you know, what we do with the data, work a little bit on the theory, and he's more theory than I am, of course. I have more the empirical, but I can follow and I can have this kind of theory for sure. So we came up with a very simple idea here. And as you see on the next slide, we have a quote to start, because it is a little bit what this work is about. So apps bring devices to life, letting you book a ride instantly, connect and share memories with friends, be alerted about current events, play games with someone across the globe, and get work done in the office or on the road. So now talking about apps, particularly in front of this audience, everybody knows what we're talking about, you know, but when we started to work on this, it was at the beginning, and then you had to make clear also to some of the audience what really an app was about. But in particular, the apps bring value to a device that otherwise would have zero value. You know, it's like the software in any kind of hardware, you know, without software, we don't have the hardware. So particular, what you're interested in here is to study, if you want, the effect of, let's say, go on the next slide, the effect of, let's say, if you want mobile applications on tablet devices. So in the specific, we're looking at one type of hardware, which is the tablet, but then of course we can generalize these to any kind of hardware. So this is nothing new, because this has been done largely in the literature to trying to understand, if you want, the impact of software on hardware. And then we're dealing with platform, but therefore we're dealing with, if you want, network effects. And in this particular case, we see a different way of looking at the problem. So what is I think what is the fine about this paper, what is the contribution we're going to see later of this paper on the literature, is that we're exploiting an important asymmetry that we have in the market. So we're looking in the specific on data about Google and about, let's say, Apple. And then we all know that the two, say, companies, they have a completely different model when it comes, for example, for in the specific here, when it comes from, you know, devices and mobile application, we have that, you know, one is a closed platform, the other is an open platform. Okay, so the study, what it wants to do, we want to try to infer what if there is an indirect effect of application quality on the demand for device, in this case, and the demand for tablet. We want to then investigate the impacts of platform policy quality intervention. So the basic idea is, it's what we do here, I think, is very simple. We estimate, if you want, a demand for tablets, where part of the demand for tablet, we account for the contributions of quality of mobile applications, and then we do two counterfactuals. And the two counterfactuals, basically, the first one is to try to understand what would be the implications if there is a quality change in the mobile application in the demand of tablet. So it's the role of complementarity that we want to try to understand through a counterfactual. The second counterfactual instead is more, if you want, of a policy driven. It is the role of interoperability or compatibility. So in this respect, we're going to investigate the impacts of platform policy quality interventions on the outcomes of the tablet PC markets. Yeah, so as you're going to see, this set of slides at the beginning, they repeat a little bit the concept, just to make sure that everybody, including myself, can follow what we're doing in this piece of work. Yeah, next slide, please. So we started by saying we're only studying Google and we're only studying Apple, and then we'll say when you limit your study, let's say, to part of the market, the question is what is the external validity of what you're doing? And in this particular case, we're looking at the specific of operating system, and we don't know that Google operating system is Android and the Apple operating system is iOS. And we can clearly see that they dominate the market. So this kind of, if you want, simple histogram is showing us what has been over time the trend of the two major, if you want, platform, which is Apple and Google, and they dominated from more than 90% of the market. Just very recently, they're starting, you know, reduce a little bit, but still about 85% of the market. So the implication is that when you study these two, you get a good understanding of what is going on in this market. Okay, that's the way we put it forward. And the particular here is suggesting, as one can expect, is the Android is the dominant in terms of the coverage of the market relative to Apple. Okay, but this is not something that will surprise us, and also it's what the model will tell us. At the end of the day, what plays an important role here is the role of indirect network effects, and then makes one platform to be dominant. But the business model that they have adopted also is the one that, for example, will characterize this kind of, if you want, outcome in the market. Yeah. So this is from Statista, this kind of, this figure, okay? So next slide. So as I said, this is a little bit making the point, putting the fingers in what I said so far, is that we have Android, and we call, in this case, Google operating system. We have iOS, which is Apple operating system, and they are installed on most of the devices in the world. You know, even more recently, more than 85% of devices have these two, if you want, operating system installed. The Apple is a cross-platform and Google is an open platform. So this is where we start. So we have this kind of asymmetry, and then we want to see what are the implications of this asymmetry in terms, if you want, of competition, but in particular case, how does an effect of a quality impact, let's say, the two platforms that have a different kind of business model, do the impact differently because of that. Okay, so this is what we're trying to get through. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is an incomplete, if you want, the pictures of the market. And what we're observing here, we simply have Apple Store, we have Google Play, Google Store, and then we have the users, we have the developers, of course, on one side of the market. This is typically, if you want, a multi-sided market, if you want, configuration. And we have the distinction is on the left. We can see that the cross-platform, that, you know, Apple controls its own devices and therefore is the monopolist in the production of, if you want, iPads, in the specific case of tablets. We have instead what Google is doing is licensing out this operating system Android to several numbers of, if you want, tablet producers. So, and this is what we say, it's an open platform, with the other is a closed one, and this is in terms of the devices. What's missing here is, of course, we didn't include the role of, if you want, advertisers, which will be part of the platform, and they also play their own role. And if you want, the linkage will become more complicated when you're trying to account also who benefits from advertising and so on. So if you want, this is a simplification, but for us, is what is relevant here is to observe that we have many tablet producers on the right-hand side, where there is Google, and we have only one tablet producer on the left-hand side, where there is Apple. Okay, on its own, in this particular, where the data that we're going to look, you know, the time frame of the data, we had Google didn't have, if you want, a share in the market of let's say, tablet. But now they start producing also their own tablets. So it opens up, if you want, another interesting question, which couldn't address that, is what happens when Google start having also their own tablet and competing with, let's say, without licensing out to the other tablet producer, particularly to Samsung, which was a big, if you want, manufacturer of these devices. Yeah, next slide. Thanks. So this is also bring us one of these policy question, but this is a policy question at the level of platform, is to simply a characterization of what has happened. And this is, if you want to, we will not be able to capture this kind of trend in our data because of the time frame, but we will capture the idea of what is meaning in our, if you want, analysis. So we observe here in blue, we have this dotted line or dashed line. In blue, we have the role of Android. And then you can clearly see that the number of, if you want, mobile applications, if you go to Google Play and Google Store, you can find these, at the beginning of 2015 was about below 2 million, but now it went up almost to 4 million. So it was a huge number of mobile applications available to be downloaded. And this mobile application, of course, can be different. Some were free, some were paid, some were in-app, and then we had different kind of, you know, segmentation of these mobile applications, if you want, etc. But what happened, if you want, in 2018, there has been a drop in the number of mobile applications, okay? So there is, Google started, for example, removing some of these mobile applications that were, we call it, of inferior quality, okay? Some of them were even malwares, and others were just abandoned, if you want, apps. But other applications that over time, you know, they were there on the store, and then they can impact in a way, if you want, the quality of the apps on the store. Apple was the first one to do that. Already in 2016, they're starting, you know, getting rid of some of the apps that were less. The big difference between the two stores is that for a long time, and particularly at the beginning, we always had that Apple was controlling the quality of mobile application in their own store, whereas Google was letting everyone that wanted to join. And this is, again, brings to the different models. One is a model of Apple that is investing in quality. The other is, if you want, if your strategy by, let's say, Google investing on, if you want, network effects, to trying to increase the number of, if you want, increase the variety that is available in their own platform, okay? Yeah, next slide. So bringing back, you know, and summing this figure that we're just seeing is we have a role of Apple that runs a quality check on the mobile application. And from 2016, Apple updated its App Store review guideline and reduced the number of apps. So in addition to this quality control, Apple has also decided, and that was a little bit the small dip in the red line that we're seeing in the previous graph, has decided to, let's say, reduce the, if you want, the number of apps in the store, but trying to maintain the one of higher quality. The Google later also has followed. As I say, the distinction was that Google for a long time was not controlling for the quality of the mobile application, but then at some point decided also by, in this case, using machine learning algorithm to reduce the number of mobile applications in their own, let's say, store and get rid of many at that point that probably they were not, either they had very few sales or they were of inferior quality, and some of them, as I say, could even be malware that were just on the platforms, okay? So that's basically a distinction that we start here. So we have double, if you want, sort of characterization in this market. We have an open and closed platform on one hand. We have these two platforms that have different strategies. One that is trying to target quality, the other is trying to target network effects in a way. And they all go along, let's say, what it is probably to be closed platform, what it is to be open platform. So ultimately, platform, what they want to do, they want to try to differentiate, because remember, if platforms do not differentiate, we tip to a monopoly. We will not have Apple and Google competing. We'll have only one platform there and it becomes the dominant one. So the next slide. Yeah. So this is the question that we can ask now. So the first thing an observation is that there has been a quality control by both platforms taking place. And we're trying to ask what is the impact of this quality control policy on the complementarity demand for the tablet devices. So we're not much interested to say what has been the effect on the demand for mobile applications, but we want to see the effect, the fallout that it had on the, say, other side of the market, where we have the producer or the manufacturer of tablets. Yeah, next slide. So alongside the, if you want, a policy of the platform to try to invest in quality, we also have this role of compatibility or interoperability. We interchangeably call the same, they're slightly different, but in this kind of, if you want, in our idea, we're trying to, let's say, to go alongside this and to make them to be the same. So well, we have again three observations to share with you, and it is that many apps are not available on both stores, on both platforms. So here, for example, Apollo is unique to Apple, and then we have that weather timeline is exclusive to Google, and then again, this was Business Insider. We have some apps that we call local apps, and also, and then I'll let you tell you also where data are coming from, these data on apps. But they say the local apps are usually restricted to an area, could be in this case a country. You can find these apps in the country, and then it's a feature that target, if you want, the taste of that specific country and not the one of others, okay? So for example, if you're a UK user, you have access to BBC News app, BBC Weather, and talking about BBC Weather app, I think you get always so wrong that I think sometimes, I don't know for how long they will survive in this market, but you know, it's very commonly used. Then we have, say, that some apps are in different store and they have, let's say, different, if you want, ratings. So for example, take Angry Birds in our data had a rating of 4.5 in Apple App Store, but only 4.1 in Google Play Store. So what is said here, and then coming back also what I just say, the data set that we're using here on mobile application, it was at the beginning, we got this data set from a company that was that point scraping before we knew how to do it. And the one important, the way they characterize local is where at least 40% of the revenues are generated within a country. So that's what is called here, if you want, a local app. But we can have apps that get 100% of the revenues within a country. So we can distinguish. Then on top of this, basically, we observe that, you know, we have these, there are two platforms, but the platforms do not have exactly the same apps that are available. And when the apps are available in both platforms, they not always have the same quality. Because remember, the way you code for Apple is different than the way you code for, if you want, for the Android, for Google, in this case. So this per se might have, even if it is the same, and it has a different quality. It is also open up, let's say, perhaps the number of, if you want, users are different. They have different perceptions of quality. That's another part that will come back at the end of this. So on the next please is a question that we are interested to trying to ask if rating proxy for quality, and we can assume that this is our proxy for quality, and we're going to use that as a proxy for quality as has been used in the literature. Is what happens if mobile applications were available in both stores and restricted to have the same quality? And we force this to call interoperability or compatibility, which is one step beyond what would be multi-homing. Okay, so this is multi-homing is the possibility to access the app, let's say, from the two store. But here we're enforcing not only you can just, you know, decide in which store you're going to download the app, but you want to make sure that the app is exactly the same quality in the two stores. So we go as far as that in imposing these. Yeah, next. So I think we want to just reprise, because so far what I've been doing, basically, I've been simply setting up a set of, if you want, research questions. I've been setting up a set of facts. I've emphasized some feature of this market. And then I want now to reprise what would be the kind of research question that we would like to address in this, and we are addressing, hopefully, in this paper. So the first one, what is the impact of app quality on the complementary demand of tablet PC? So to answer this question, you only need to do is to estimate the demand of some sort, and then have a way to, you know, introduce as in that demand an effect of quality on mobile application. The two remaining questions that are more coming from the counterfactual. So counterfactual in this case means to estimate the equilibrium in the market and see what will happen if. And what is the impact of raising the average app quality on prices, market share, profits, and consumer surplus on the two asymmetric platforms? And what is the impact of imposing interoperability, say, on prices, market share, profits, and consumer surplus on the two asymmetric platforms? So basic idea is, you know, we're trying to have a way to address this question. My point of view, from what I've been telling you so far, is already clear the direction where we're going, and then the only thing that might be interesting to see what are the effects, are they significant or not, or what are the directions. But in the particular, what we're interested in here is to compare which platform will gain more for this kind of, you know, counterfactual. Is there since we are having an asymmetry to start, does it mean that ultimately also the effect is asymmetric, or is the effect is going to be the same for the two platforms? So this is the way we think in this one. So I don't know, Lars, I forgot to say if it is questions, but otherwise my assumption I keep on going, and then you interrupt me when it's needed. Okay.
Yes, people who have a question can always interrupt, and so yeah.
Yeah, also there is clarification question, something that have not been clear, so please do so, okay? Okay, so next slide. So there is a literature that we're trying to benchmark to, and then we also say how we try to contribute to an existing literature. It's a thick literature because it started back into, if you want, into the 80s with the famous paper, but there is certainly a literature on the quality of complementary product on demand. So, and here we have the paper by famous paper by Church and Gandal and Park and Hoashi, all well published in the top journals. We do have, let's say, the indirect quality effect of Kortz, and this is captured by Kortz and Lederman and Kim et al. So you can see the way we segmented it in blocks is we have a block of literature on the quality and the effect on complementary products. We have demand estimation on mobile application, but bear in mind that here we estimate the demand for tablet, although the Gosenham paper was rich in terms of the estimate of the use is similar to the one we're using here. But they were looking at the demand for mobile applications. And then with the role of platform interoperability and compatibility, we also set up in an existing literature because that started in the 80s, basically, and then still runs on now, okay? And in this, you know, there is been literature on multi-homing, on compatibility as a way to mitigate the role, if you want, to network effects. We all know what role indirect network effect can play on platforms. And therefore, you know, it's a way basically to avoid the market to tip to monopoly. and so please, next slide, unless there are questions on these. And then there is eventually a literature on platform quality control, and there is also a very recent one that goes on now of unpublished work. There is work by Haju. Haju is a big name actually in this field, and although this one that we cite here is a working paper, and then there's also some work with Baudreau. The recent one is a literature that comes also from computer sciences, and therefore we have these contributions of computer sciences like Tech, for example, and then Wang et al. Is a computer science contributions on these, and the role of removing of Google of these malware apps. And 2021 is a nice paper because it looks at the policy aspect of, if you want, the effect of quality control. So all of these basically creates a package, and then we have done some work in 2018 with Fabio Manenti and Stefano Comino on the role of mobile application, where we're looking at the heterogeneous impact of updates. So in that case, if one can think about quality to be measured by the updates, we're trying to distinguish between minor and major updates in the work, and then the impact that they had in the demand for apps at that point that was controlled by, again, Google and Apple. And then we eventually study also what was the prompting and update by the platforms. So in this, the next one, I think we try to make clear what we're trying to think of contributing to this very thick literature on platforms, if you want, competition, but also some of the literature is dealing with, Google and Apple directly and these platforms, and they are either on apps or some are even in the role of hardware and software. We do contribute because, as I said, we exploit the asymmetry between Google and Apple. And what we do here in this work, we sketch an intuitive model of competition, and we thought, what is the easiest model that can capture the idea of what is going on in this market? So that's what is the starting point for us. Then we estimate a structured demand model for tablets, where we account for the indirect effect or the complementary effects of application quality. And we test for, if possibly, if you want, asymmetry impact of an increase in application quality on important outcomes in the market. In our specific, we're going to focus on the role of prices, if you want, on demand, we're going to see on profits, and then consumer welfare as well. So those are the ones that we're trying to have a say, given our estimate of what's going to happen. And then, as it's very clear, let's say we also test for the possible asymmetric impact of imposing, for example, interoperability or compatibility and in terms of quality. And this is on important outcomes of gain of tablet demands. So the next slide, please. What are the I think I left time, but didn't have many slides, but it should be a key finding. Here is the role of app quality has a positive income on the demand for tablets. Then we also have that the exclusion of we're going to measure here, the way we look at the role of quality increase, we'll say what happens if, for example, the platform, they reduce by 10%, let's say, reduce the bottom of their apps. But be aware that when I talk about the data, we're going to make clear that the data we're going to use here is the top 1,000 apps, and it's available in a store in a country and in a period of time. So in this, when we say removing the top bottom, let's say we're removing the top 10% of or the low quality apps, is basically the mobile application of the top 1,000 that had the lower quality. So we're not removing really the really bad one. We come to the data for that. So it's just to get an idea of what will happen. And what we do observe, you're going to be larger gains of demand from the outside market than from in competition between the two platforms. So there is some additional demand that will come in terms of tablet devices. We see a larger effect on market share and profits of tablets on Apple, and we see no basically major change in prices. We see an increase in consumer welfare, but this is a partial effect because we only look at the increase in consumer welfare through the hardware, in this case, the tablet devices. We don't see what happens in the role consumer welfare from the mobile application side. When we impose interoperability, in this case, all apps have the same quality in both stores, we found that the lower Apple tablet prices, there is no variations on Android tablet price. So there is market share and profits arising from Android tablet producers and eventually increased consumer welfare, and also in this case, It's a partial effect. So bottom line is, it seems like one of the findings is gonna have here is that there is an asymmetric impact on the two types of quality. In one case, when there is, if you want, a quality improvement by the platform, it seems that Apple is the one that gains most. When instead we are imposing interoperability, it seems like Google is the one that is gaining most. And we're gonna see why in the next slides. Yeah. So the model is, that we use is very, very simple. It's just, if you want, a two-stage model where we have in the first stage, there is inter-platform competition between, let's say, Apple and Google. So their operating system, iOS and Android. And we locate them in an hoteling unit line. So not necessarily at the end, let's say, because we want to account for the role of outside option. So in this, we have, if you want, the utility of a heterogeneous consumer at location, say, X, when buying a tablet, either from platform, say, 1, which is iOS, or from platform 2, which is Android. And in this model, we also like the possibility that consumer might choose to buy the neither from Google nor from Apple, because they have an outside option available. So the utility we model in the theoretical side, we model an interaction between the quality of the hardware, which is captured by ZH, and the quality and the expected quality of the software, which is Z overlying is the expected quality of the software at that, if you want, platform. And of course, there is utility of the price that they pay, and then there's this utility of transportation, there is utility of, if you want, horizontal product differentiation. What appears here, we're allowing the possibility that now we create the combined effect of hardware and software is basically, it could well be that there is a vertical component of product differentiation into this one. You know, to one of the two might have a higher one. So this is as simple as the model. When you're going to see in the empirical part, the only difference is going to be, apart from adding, you know, the error term, apart from adding some additional, if you want, complexity, we're going to simply separate out the effect of quality as additive, where here is interactive. The reason why it's interactive because, you know, the utility of having a hardware without software or having software without hardware should be net zero. So that's why we had this interaction, but it's really without loss of generality, and having this extended to having additive just makes more tedious the formula that we get. So the consumer gain utility from tablet quality is at age and expected up quality is at overlying. And then we mentioned this, we look at it as an interaction. So there is a marginal utility for quality, we call it psi. Then we have alpha, which is the consumer sensitivity to prices. In the theoretical model, we assume this to be constant, to be the same for a consumer. In the empirical model, we allow for that having a random coefficients, and therefore having heterogeneous, say, if you want, consumer sensitivity to prices. And then we have, if you want, case, the degree of product differentiation in this model, which is classical telling. So this is basically, so there is competition between the two platforms. And then, of course, when it comes to the next slide, please, the stage 2 is in stage 1, sorry, when we solve this competition, we get this characterization of the demand for hardware of, let's say, platform 1. We think platform 1 to be Apple and platform 2 to be Google. So we have their demand, of course, that depends on all that you have in a typical hoteling model. But what is relevant now is what is the price charged by platform 2, for example. And this is in stage 1, and then what happens in stage 2. So in stage 2 is, this is the next slide, is we model as competition. So we say we have one platform which is closed, and this is Apple, it acts as a monopoly, which is used to distribute various products. You know, we have an iPad, but there are various versions of iPad that, you know, the Apple is selling, and but internalize fully what the pricing is of these, let's say, tablets. Then we have, say, Google, on the other hand, which is licensing out to a set of producers of tablets which are in competition with each other, okay? And we basically our modeling is assuming that they are homogeneous, you know, though in principle they are not, you know, something is different from us or from the other, but so assume for simplicity that they are homogeneous, and we model as a simple hoteling model. So, but when we model in an upselling model, you get two basically results by doing that. The one is, and you solve it by backward induction, is it's a model of, if you want, hoteling competition, where the quantity produced by one of the tablet producer is simply 1/n of the total, say, quantity available sold by the platform, in this case 2. But the price is simply PH2, okay? And this is the problem. This is something that we're going to model here, is the price is symmetric. We're going to see that in equilibrium, the price of, let's say, the platform 2 does not depend on the quality for the way that we model it. So next slide is simply characterizing this equilibrium in the market. As I say, they are simple. Remember, L1 and L2, think about is the position of the platform in the line, and it's basically telling how much should be the outside option there. And we have, when we're looking at the demand for platform 1, we see it depends on the hardware and the software quality on its own, and also, of course, the hardware and software quality to the competitor. This is very much common when you have a model of interdependence, as it is this kind of hoteling model. And there are, of course, differences in cost that comes in. So nothing here is really surprising. And then, in fact, in this model, nothing is surprising if you use this model, you know, but it still can tell a little bit of some of the prediction that we would expect from the empirical part. We have an equilibrium prices, and the equilibrium prices here, we need to note what? First thing we to say on this set of quantity is that the effect of software, say the own effect of software is positive on the demand of the same platform, and it is negative on the demand of the other platform. This is what the first set of equations on demand are telling us. When we're looking at the role, if you want, of prices, sorry, and we observe that the prices have a positive quality, as a positive impact on the prices of the first platform, which is Apple, but it has no impact on the prices of the second platform, which is, in this case, Android. So this is, of course, the way we model competition in this market. It's a two-stage, and we have in one hand for Google, we have strong competition as an oligopoly competition within, say, market with the homogeneous, say, producers. And then in that respect, we have quality plays no role. Of course, this is the extreme and in the limit, but, you know, maybe this is telling that the prediction we will expect empirically that the effect on prices for, let's say, Google should not be high if there is a change in quality of the mobile applications. Then we can put everything in terms of profits. Once we understand the role of pricing, we can think about profits, and possibly under certain situations with this model, we can easily talk about consumer welfare as well. So this is the theory. It's very, very extremely simple, and it gives a little bit of intuition what we're going to try to test now empirically in our econometrics. Slide, please. How am I doing with time? Yeah. How am I doing with time, actually? Because I don't know what time we started, and
oh, it's fine. I mean, it should be around 35 minutes to 1 hour. So if you go for 1 hour, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so I tried. Yeah. So the prediction one will have the effect of app quality on tablets. So we want to try to understand two things, as it's clear. And then from the model, we know that the quantities and profits are affected by the quality of the apps distributed in the dedicated store. And we also know that, let's say, so the quality has an impact basically on demand and profits so far. But then also we say that Apple hardware is sufficiently superior if we have a condition that Apple hardware is sufficiently superior to, let's say, the Android hardware, then the impact of app quality on tablet demands and profit is larger on Apple than on Google. So remember, the model we're having here is that the two were interacted, the quality of software and the quality of hardware. And if you were looking back on the previous slide, if you were comparing, for example, a change in quality in the two one, you will determine that, you know, when you compare the two qualities, if the hardware of one is sufficiently larger than the other, then you get which one will dominate the others. So prediction two instead say that for compatibility and interoperability, reduces the price and quantity of Apple's tablets, and it does affect the equilibrium price of Google tablets, but increases the number of Google tablets. So So in this respect, this is what we had already seen in the slides, is that in case a quality effect does not impact, if you want, the prices of, let's say, Google, which is platform 2, but it does impact the demand, if you want, for that one. And it generates an overall expansion of demand for tablets. Consumer separately desire with interoperability. So the overall effect basically of compatibility and interoperability is a market expansion. The platform that gains most is going to be, let's say, Google, and the effect on prices is not much, so it's coming to an expansion in demand, basically stealing, if you want, from Apple. And Apple, in this case, is going to be losing. But there is a reason why this is happening. But we're going to see the counterfactor. We'll understand why do we have this kind of prediction like this. Next slide. So the data on tablet are basically, if you want, characterized of characteristic of the hardware and the prices of the hardware. We have product level information on tablets of about 465 models. And there are 33 vendors, about 3,700 more observations. We have data from 5 European countries, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK, from Q3 2013 to Q1 2014. To be precise, our data set was much longer than that. It was going back on time from 2010, but for the purpose of this analysis, if we want to put together, let's say, software and hardware, we have to limit the hardware data set to a shorter period of time. And an observation is basically a tablet model with Wi-Fi connectivity, either LAN, 3G or 4G, screen size, wide media pad, Wi-Fi 8 GB, 7 inches, and the panel is unbalanced. Then we have mobile application data. In this case, we're only using at the end the average quality of this data set. So put in another way, we're very limited in the use that we're doing. And we have data on 6 monthly panels of about 2,000 most downloaded apps in Google Play and in Apple Store. And then we follow again the same 5 European countries. And then in this case, basically, it's a data set of the overlapping of when we put the two together is going to be only the 3 periods. So we're going to, when we put together the mobile application data with the data on the tablet, we only have 3 periods that we can, if you want, overlap. And again, it's unbalanced panel, okay? Then we collect data on income. So we have data from this household survey from Eurostat on individual incomes, and then we use this information to capture this price sensitivity, and then which might be, you know, consumer specific. So with these 3 data sets, we built up basically our econometrics, and then yeah, next slide. So we have some descriptive statistics here of what is market share, price, the screen size. So it's the characteristics of the products. If you want to rapid observation, I want only to highlight 2 things. One is that, you know, when it comes to the app rating, which is our measure of quality, is basically the average, if you want, app rating available in that platform, in that country, in that period, okay? And for this reason, we have, you know, 5 countries and 3 periods, which gives us, and for 2 platforms, we give us 30 observations, okay? Then we have income. In income, we just take basically income is a cross-section that we use, in this case, 100, if you withdraw from the full distribution, 100 individuals from each country, so for a total of 500 observations. Of course, the app rating then is going to be mapped at the level of the, let's say, products. But then remember, for us, we do know the only variation that app rating has is over country and over time and over platforms. And income only varies within individuals and, let's say, countries, but not over time. Okay, so next. Say we measure quality is going to be used app rating here, and I think it's being used also in the literature by Binken and Stremesh 2009, Kimeto 2014. Is typically a scale 1 to 5. I'm going to see now what is in our data in the next slide, I think. Next. Yeah, so this is simply to show what is the average app rating on a platform. So we are on the left-hand side, we have Apple. On the right-hand side, we have Google Store should be now. But then we observe here, let's say, Italy versus the 4 countries, and how was the trend over time. Remember, we have monthly data of this mobile application, but in our analysis, we only use basically 3 data points. But what is important here is to highlight, the variations that this measure of our proxy of quality has across country and over time, because it's for identification is going to be important that we need to have sufficient variations over time and over country in order to be able to identify the effect of, let's say, application quality on, let's say, the demand for tablets. Yet this is going to be treated as an endogenous variable in part of the analysis, so we also need to have instruments for that, but we're going to see that soon. So this is the kind of variations that is available. So you can compare the platforms, and you can compare also time and, if you want, countries. Next slide. So the econometrics, we try to get the econometrics as close as possible to this very simple, intuitive, and theoretical model that we have developed. And for that reason, we nest in the econometrics. We create the nest by basically operating system. So we have 3 nests. One is the possibility the consumer might choose not to buy a tablet, to choose to buy a tablet that uses, the operating system iOS, or to buy a tablet that uses the operating system Android. One that choose within iOS, here in this model, we think is an iPad, although we can have different versions of iPads. And then when it comes to Android, we instead have a set of competitors that are there available, okay? And that's the utility. It can be characterized for a utility that will map into a random coefficient nested logic model. So equation 3, what it has is, first notice that the sensitivity to prices, alpha, is now individual specific. So that means that that is going to be treated as a random coefficient. Then we're going to have, the effect of the quality of the software will come in on its own. And here, if you notice, we don't have a parameter that is specific to the platform. So we're allowing, this quality to be the same over time, platform and countries. Then we have the effect of this unobserved heterogeneity of an individual for the say, operating system. And then eventually is the pure error term there. Once you assume the error term to be a type 2 Weibull distribution, it brings us back to a logistic distribution, which is what we use here for having part of the analysis to be, if you want, for practical reason, part of the analysis to be more analytically solvable. So we do a joint estimation of demand, and the profit equation, what we do here is simply Bertrand differentiated product model. So you get a first order condition of Bertrand differentiated product model where they say, in this case, the firm choose the prices of all of their products, and then we get a set of first order condition from there. Okay, so that's from this utility function, we get our demand function. Next slide. So this is simply basically introducing what, let's say, every component of the utility in the econometrics is. I want only to highlight the last row at the bottom and simply say we only have one random coefficient in this case, and this is the one associated to prices. Part of the reason because we want to try to capture this different competition that it is there in the market. And if you see this is basically based on Evo. You might have seen this already. So it's the composition of the random coefficient in some observable coming from the demographic characteristics, which is in our case would be the role of income, and then the unobservable individual characteristics, which are simply drawn in this case from a standard normal distribution, as you would do in case of a random effects or a classic random coefficient logic model. So anything else is a classic, and there's nothing to, and it's also per se is a classic. Next slide. It's only to give intuition of this kind of estimator that we're using here is a random coefficient logic model. So what you get? You get first a probability that an individual I, remember our observation is an individual now because we have also these additional data available from the simulations of individual taste, for example, in terms of the random coefficient, but also for the pure, if you want, observable information on income. Okay, so that will map into the probability that an individual I will choose, for example, product age in this. So it's tablet age. We no longer have, so the choice of the platform, and now it's the choice of the product. And this is just simply represented like that. If decomposed by part which is mean utility and deviation from the mean. So this is slide, I will skip it because it's only technical, but it's basically the way these analyses work. Okay, I can come back to this if there's any question later, but we prefer to go to the results. Next slide. So from here, what you get your market share of demand, which is basically your demand side. Equation 6 will represent your demand size, and you obtain by simulating, basically. Once you get the distributions of, if you want, taste of individual for prices and taste and the information on income, we can simulate the days over these individuals, and we have NS of them basically in each country period, and then out of there we get the market share that we observe in the market. So for example, this NS will be 100 individual in country 1 and period 1. Okay, so that's then the same is in country 2 and period 2. We have another 100 individual from that country that we have drawn. We get this pricing equation from the first order condition. So basically, equation 6 and 7 makes our system of equations. We have a system of equation from the demand side, and we have a system of equation from the pricing equation, and we estimate it jointly into these. So out of here, we can estimate, infer, back out what the marginal cost is once you're able to capture what the markup in the market is. And the markup in the market relates to the, if you want, the primitive of your demand function. So all of this is part of a, if you want, a routine, and we'll say we use that. We don't, but again, I'm happy to come back to you if you have questions about this later. But now I want to go to the results. Next slide. For identification, we're going to have 3 endogenous variables. First, we estimate the model when there are only 2 endogenous variables, which is the price, and the within market share, which is resulting on this kind of assumption of having a segmentation of this segment of operating system level. And then we have, if you want, a classic instrument that has been used in the literature to basically to be able to identify these 2 coefficients. Then we also treat application quality as endogenous in bottom part, and here we use the average characteristic of all products in the same, if you want, let's say, operating system as a way to capture, correlation that is existing between the quality and the quality of any others in that. So this is a little bit what is used typically in the literature. It's not any novelty here. So we just simply have adopted, and then the results that are coming is the next slides, please. So I'm going to simply go through quickly, and I'm going to stop talking on the next slide. Is the first set of results, and check what time it is. Yeah, we have 7 minutes. So we observe here basically what we've done. We compare different estimators. We started from the nested logit, let's say treating as ordinary squared, we don't account for the endogeneities, then we account for the endogeneity, and then we do also optimal instruments into that, and therefore then we move into the random coefficient nested logit again, and then we have the random coefficient nested logit with the optimal instruments. Okay, so this is simply to show to look at the parameter of interest. One can compare what is the role of application quality and how does the application quality parameter changes when you change, you improve, if you want, your estimator through that, and when you account for application quality to be endogenous. So the next slide will focus on the next slide on one of them, which is the one that we're going to use in our simulation, is basically the results coming out of the random coefficient nested logit model with optimal instruments. And the results are here. So we have a demand side estimation as well as a supply or pricing side estimation. So think about the supply to be your estimate of the marginal cost in this case. In the paper, we discuss also how we interpret this coefficient, but basically more or less you can thinking about proportions. For example, if you take the value of the screen size of the 11.113, it means that if you increase the screen size by 1 inch, the marginal cost of production will go up by about 12%. So it's the exponential of that you have to take. The role of quality is negative, and so we have a price effect we call alpha, which is the mean effect of, if you want, price sensitivity is negative as significant, and then so we have the additional effect of, you know, adding, if you want, a distribution of price sensitivity that comes from the effect of income and the effect of unobservable individual characteristics. Here they are captured by the parameter sigma and the parameter pi. We put this together and then we get, of course, an overall distribution. Some individuals might be more sensitive to the price of the tablets, others are less, and therefore we want to capture this feature in this kind of analysis. We also have, of course, the important parameter for us is the role of up quality. Up quality ended up to be only mildly statistically significant in this analysis, but it has a positive effect on the demand of tablet. Of course, when we see these numbers, we cannot, because remember, it's the demand side as it is not this easily readable. So we would want to see the effect in terms of elasticities or the effects in terms of, if you want, the counterfactual. We can measure what will be the effect of a change in quality. But certainly from here, we can say that the quality of mobile application has an impact, even if mild, on the demand for tablets. Okay, that's the first result that we come out from this table. Next slide, please. And then below here are some statistics on the quality of the instrument, etc. But that is key. And also the number of negative marginal cost that we end up having in this case is, once you account for the endogeneity of quality as well as prices and within market share, your estimate now is on the right side of what we expect from economic theory, that, you know, most of the marginal costs are non-negative. This is simply a frequency distribution of the random coefficients on prices. This is important for the part of competition that we're modeling. We move on the next, please. And then here we have some information on price elasticities of demand. It happens, this might look a little bit unexpected, but when we're solving the theory, this actually is not. So you have that Apple's effect seems to be more elastic than the effect on an Android base, if you want, tablet. But part of the reason is because we are not here accounting for quality, and secondly is it's really a result of having very high prices in terms of Apple relative to the price of Androids. So it's the quality effect that drives that elasticity to be like this, and you can decompose in the effect of the product and also at the segment operating system level. You can decompose what it is the effect on Apple versus the effect on Android. So if you were, for example, to run the theory on this to check these elasticities, if you are assuming, for example, the marginal cost to be zero, you will never be able to derive this demand. But once the marginal costs are non-zero, then you're going to get exactly this, that in case of a monopoly compared to competition, you get this elasticity to be higher with the monopolies. Okay, with higher quality, sorry. The next slide. Now, let me talk about this one, because this is the first counterfactual, and it's informative, and then we're going to summarize the results soon. So what we're doing here, we're trying to say, if you remember, when we put down the quality in equilibrium, basically, for the two platforms, we had that they depended on, there was basically a direct and indirect effect of quality. And we knew that the effect of quality on the demand typically was positive, and the cross effect of quality from the other platform was negative. So there is some substitutability, if you want, between the two platforms. So now we have an effect on price changes, and to this one, we done for France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK. Those are percent and changes. The R here means we're comparing if the distributions of prices, basically, the distribution of price changes for France, for example, on Apple is the same as the price change distribution for Android. And R means you are rejecting that they are the same, of course. In this case, you find that the price change in Apple is significantly higher than the price change than Android for France. And so when you see an F instead, you're failing to reject that hypothesis. So this is the way you read this table. In terms, you're doing simple test to, let's say, compare the distributions of prices for the two. When we say here, this, the other thing to say, when you see the asterisk in terms of significance, those are empirical distributions that we're looking at. We don't know the true distribution, but empirically and through bootstrapping, we find it that, you know, we reject the hypothesis based on how many negatives you come out and have in there on the distributions of prices, okay? So these are what the asterisks will mean. But when looking overall, the effect on prices is pretty, look, those are percent change in prices. Remember what we're doing here, we took away the bottom 100 apps in terms of quality. We are recalculating the average quality in the store. We simulated what would be the new equilibrium prices and the new equilibrium market share in this market, the new profits, and everything comes here to play. So there seems to be a large effect on market share. So for example, suppose that we focus here on France, there is a large effect on market share for, let's say, Apple, by increasing the quality of the platform by removing the bottom 100 apps. And we do not have the much effect for Android. It's much lower for Android here. So, and if you compare them all, we always have the effect on market share for Apple is much larger than the one it is for Android. The change in prices is never so high, okay? So there seems to be more of a, let's say, an effect on demand. And also, if you compare when you say the effect on one, how do you, if you, for example, if there is an increase in quality in both platforms, it seems that, you know, the increase in market share is coming from the outside option. So part of the consumer that were not buying now will start buying the product. We can look at the effect of profits. And again, when you compare profits, you can see that the profits of Apple will go up far more than the profits of Android. Now, there are two panels here. The top panel is looking at the average own effect. So we're simply focusing what will happen here if now Apple is removing by their store the top 100 apps. And we look at the effect. Then we look separately, what will happen now if there is instead Google that is doing that. So in that respect, we look at separately what will be the effect on, let's say, the two platforms. And then we can look also on the cross effect. So for example, if I increase now, if the quality of Apple, it has a direct effect on Apple, which is this, but what is the indirect effect on Google? And this is captured here on this second panel. So is the, if you want, the average cross effect of this increase in quality. In terms of consumer surplus, the consumer surplus in percentage will go up about by 3% on the estimation of device, on tablet devices, okay? And this goes up if you want for both store, but slightly more for Apple. Next slide. We redo now the counterfactual, but now we remember we're looking at a different counterfactual, which is supposed to be imposed interoperability or compatibility. So we take now the app and we say, let's make all the apps to be the same in the two stores and also to have the same quality. So what would be the implication? And the results that are following here are coming from one simple thing. If you look at the data, it happens that the quality of in all countries, in all periods, we also have that the quality of apps in, if you want, Google is lower than the quality of apps of Apple. And by quality, remember, we're measuring by the reviews here. So in this respect, what is going to happen when you're imposing the quality to be the same in the two platforms, you're pushing up the quality of Android at the cost, if you want, of Apple. Because there is substitutability going on, Apple then is going to lose into that process. And this is what the results are telling us. When you're comparing, for example, Apple and Android, you're going to see that Apple is losing from here, and then Android is gaining from this kind of situations. Because the initial conditions were like those. Had there been perhaps that the quality in Android was higher than the quality of Apple, it would have been the other way around. So this result is simply coming out of this feature of the data, but it's also something that we do observe and we can expect to be in the real world. You know, the quality of applications should be higher in Apple because Apple has a quality control that it has in Google, and now imposing this compatibility and interoperability would be bad for Apple and it would be good news for Google. Next slide. So we've done also some robustness checks in the appendix. So we've done, remember, so far, and I need to be clear, we thought about, when we think about average quality, we're looking at the average weighted quality, where the weights are by the downloads. So put into another way, if we have apps that are superstar, that will play, their quality will play a very important role into the quality of the platform. And in a way, this is what we expect. We don't know the quality of many apps. We only possibly know, each of us, the quality of, say, 50 apps. I don't know, maybe some of you more, some of you less. So those are the ones that for us, we think as a consumer in terms of quality. And therefore, when we wait, we get this measure of average quality at the platform. But when I thought, can we really do the analysis now, the estimation, by simply assuming that the quality of apps was, not only the top 100 apps were defining the quality, or only the top 200 apps were defining the quality of the platform level. So put it another way, we average quality for the top 100 apps, we do the estimation of the random coefficient estimate logic model, we look what's the estimate of the application quality, and we find it is very similar to the one we use the weighted average. However, when we take the bottom 100 apps and the bottom 200 apps, we find that the estimate of the application quality in that case is far lower than it is is not significant, and then is lower than it is in the case, sorry, it's not significant actually, than it is in the case of the weighted average. So this for us was a little bit to think about when we use this weighted average, but we're basically looking is the superstar apps, the top apps, and this is a way to show. Next slide. So the conclusions are in this slide here. So application quality is relevant for the tablet PC market. We found the effect on demand of application quality was positive and at least mildly significant. We have also found that the exclusion of the bottom up, put it another way, we define this as improving the quality of, if you want, the platforms, and has major is good news for Apple more than it is for Google. So Apple is more to gain for improving in quality. That's also why Apple for a long time has invested a lot in quality. They are specializing in providing quality of apps, but also quality of hardware. And therefore, it's they have more to gain in this way. Instead, if you impose interoperability or compatibility, it's Google that is going to be gaining more out of this. Part of the reason, because by starting with a lower quality, if you impose quality would be the same in the two stores, you're going to have because of substitutability, you're going to get that Google is gaining at the expenses of Apple. And good news is that also both if you want, these counterfactual have a positive effect on consumer welfare, and they also have a positive effect on demand expansion. So this is the kind of result that we have in this paper. If you want, it's a very simple paper, it's a very simple idea, and it's basically this is if it is our contribution. And there's one more slide when I can say now what can be perhaps future extensions on these. And what we not exploited in this work, and this was mainly for the data limitation, is if you want the network effect from users to developers. So developers here play no role. But in a dissertation, my PhD student, developers were active and were starting, choosing the optimal qualities and endogenously. But when it comes to this applicability, if you don't have the right data, you cannot test that part. So there is room, for example, to extend these in terms of the role of developers. And then there is also possible to readjust for the possible selections in the app rating by store. We started with a situation where Apple has better apps, has better, devices. And what if we're trying to understand the selection that goes on? This is a selection that has implication also on the types of consumer that are left behind. So what happens is, even if you are imposing this interoperability or compatibility, one issue that we're still going to face if you don't impose also compatibility and interoperability on hardware quality is that you're going to face that you're going to have the consumer that will download from Apple will be different than the consumer that will download from Google. And even if the quality is exactly the same, the perception of quality might still differ. So there is room to think about what could do in these kind of situations, okay? There is an additional point there. What is the fact that platform can have over time? They have tailored their strategy to countries. So in our data, for example, when we're looking at the changes in quality, updates, it was a decision at the platform and it was a worldwide decision at the time that we investigated these. Over time now, the platform trying to get more of their, if you want, even updates and so on to differ by country. So they're creating, if you want, localized Apple Store and Google Store. They can, if you internalize the difference that there are in different countries in terms of preferences. And there is room if you want to study this one and how different it is from the past. I'll pause it here, and already thank you so much for being able to bear with me for, I think, 1 hour and with no interruption. So I'm grateful to you, and I'm here to answer to any question that you might have or clarification that you might need, something that I had to rush towards the end that was not clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franco. So we open the floor to everyone. Let me stop the recording first.